I'd like to call this meeting of the Bedford County Board of Supervisors to order. Welcome everyone here tonight, and if you have a cap on, we'd appreciate it if you remove it during the duration of the meeting, and if you have a cell phone, if you would silence it or turn it off, that would be great. So we'll start by taking a moment for silence. Thank you. If you join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Just everyone's had a chance to take a look at the agenda for tonight. Are there any questions? If none, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Davis, were you?
I have one issue on the consent items.
Okay.
It's the checkpoints. I want to say,
What, you want to, did you want to move something off of the consent agenda?
if it needs no explanation, if it permits no explanation, I would like to remove the resolution for the grant for the DUI checkpoints.
Would that be items?
No, it would.
We'd be moving it
We
to a
just move it to it.
discussion item. Is that 6A that you're referencing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we could move that from 6A to, would be number 9G. Okay, any other discussion? I would entertain a motion for the amended agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Bansley. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Davis. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. Next, we'll have our citizen comment time. We have a fair amount of folks that have signed up tonight. We have 15 minutes allotted for that, so that works out to about 2 minutes per speaker. I would encourage you, if you've heard something that you were planning to say, that perhaps you hit on your important point and not repeat what we've heard there. But anyway, you'll have 2 minutes. We'll need you to state your name and your address, and then share with us whatever you'd like to on that. So our first one up is John Carroll.
Thank you. My name's John Carroll. I live at 1186 Camp J.C. Road. I'm happy to see the item on the agenda, the consideration of a resolution rescinding support for the Camp J.C. intersection improvements under 9B. I would ask you to approve that. My family has lived on Camp J.C. Road since 1947. I'm third generation living there. And all those of us neighbors who have been discussing this project for some time are convinced that carrying out this project will break Carroll's Law. If you haven't heard of Carroll's Law, it says, don't make it worse. In other words, nothing is so bad that you can't make it worse. Don't make it worse. We feel that the visibility we have coming out of Camp J.C. Road at the stop sign to the east, all the way down to the overpass to the right.
You're talking about turning them all into one turn lane where you have tractors, you have trucks going into that turn lane. So you're going to have a backup on 460. You're going to have cars speeding down through there and knocking into those. This project will do nothing to help what needs to be done. In order to stop the loss of life, the loss of property, and the wrecks, you're going to need to address the actual problem, which is the curve, where they cannot see. The trucks, they're in the right-hand lane anyway. Left-hand turn lanes are not a problem. The cars, you give enough time coming down the hill, the cars can see you. This is not an issue. The issue is the curve that is coming down. And that's why I'm thinking $3.7 million that's basically going to do nothing is a lot of money. So I ask that you not do this project. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's see, we have Mary Maxey, and then after her would be Robert Goad.
My name is Mary Maxey. My address is 1583 Camp J.C. Road, Blue Ridge, Virginia. And I have lived on J.C. Camp Road for 40 years. But the reason I'm speaking tonight is my mom got killed at that accident, at that intersection. And I really don't blame the crossover for it. A tractor trailer was coming westbound, and Mom was going to take a right-hand turn down there. And the tractor trailer broadsided her and pushed her up the road into the guardrail between J.C. Camp Road and Woodhaven Nursing Home. And I think speed was the reason, because the driver stated to the insurance company that he chose to change lanes instead of trying to stop. There were no brake marks on the highway at all after this accident. And I don't think closing the crossover is the answer. Whether you're traveling east or west, the traffic does not want to slow down. It's just as bad if you're traveling west and slow down to take a right to enter J.C. Camp Road. If the traffic is diverted west, there will be a lot of large vehicles coming from J.C. Camp Road, Goose Creek Valley Road, and 43 from Buchanan, trying to make a right turn to go up Woodhaven Hill, moving at a slow rate of speed. There is a possibility that the eastbound right lane could be added, and thus leaving the left lane, the inside lane, for a turning lane. I feel like that would be beneficial, and I do oppose closing the crossover, and I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that would be Robert Goad.
They've already said everything I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Randy Dooley.
Rather thrilling situation of going across the other lanes of the eastbound side. But fortunately, I had very limited injuries. The car was destroyed, of course, mine was. And the relationship, I think, is simply, it's never a good idea to decelerate on a major highway in what's commonly known as the fast lane. And that's the logic that I don't get regarding the new intersections, is the notion of taking a U-turn after decelerating in the fast lane. And I know there's a provision for some form of a small deceleration lane. The only other comments I have is I find it inefficient at the least and somewhat taxing to the public. I don't live on Camp J.C. Road, but I certainly understand and appreciate what the residents, their concerns. Anytime you are, by design of the road, you're heading in the opposite direction from your destination, there's something inherently wrong with this picture. Not only the waste of fuel, energy, time, and so forth. And in the case, it was shocking to me, if you'd run some basic calculations, just the average home on J.C. Road, if they intend to go to Bedford, head east, well out of their way up the road, turning back around, going back down, and so forth, and repeating the process when they come home, and you would find that it's going to accumulate some
1,500 miles per year for a man and a wife alone. And I don't know how many residents live on Camp J.C. Road, but there's certainly a fair number of cars.
You've used up your time there. If you have a quick thing you want to wrap up with?
No, that's it. I'm just opposed to it. It would be hard to convince me it's going to lend itself to greater safety. Just the notion of the increased number of times that a vehicle accelerates and decelerates in a major highway.
Okay.
I think there's a better way, and I'm sure it'll be proposed.
All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have Rhonda Maxey and then David Graves.
I'm Rhonda Maxey. Good evening to you all. I live at 1083 Camp J.C. Road. I've lived there for close to 44 years. I want to thank y'all for hearing us again. We appreciate it, and we know we've bothered you with it before, but I know you'll use an open mind. About 2 years ago, Tim and I got a FedEx package delivered, and we didn't know what it was. It was VDOT asking for open access to our property anytime they wanted to survey and whatever, and we didn't know what the survey was all about. So I called, of course. I made a lot of calls. And it come out to be that it was going to be this thing called a smart scale project. I didn't know what that was. But as I researched that, that's Virginia's data-driven prioritization process to fund the right transportation projects to generate the greatest benefit for taxpayers. And we feel that the data that was used for this smart scale project was erroneous, and the $3.7 million would be better spent in another way. And we got a handout at the VDOT meeting the other week, the open house they had, and I don't agree with this statement. It says this project is intended to reduce rear-end collisions and angle crashes. There is a high frequency of angle crashes for vehicles turning left from Camp J.C. Road onto the eastbound Route 460. This project will eliminate left-hand turn movements on and off of Camp J.C. Road and construct median turn lanes for U-turns and close 4 existing crossovers. Well, we haven't found the high frequency of these accidents they're talking about because one of our friends here, Doug, has, he's vetted all these accidents, and that's not the case. I don't understand, and of course we had Mary to come up here and talk about her mother's tragic accident, but we have a lot of concerns, and one of them is, as one of them mentioned, the first responders, every second matters, and we will have to go westbound into 60 and 65 mile an hour traffic. And that sounds kind of crazy probably to y'all, but when you see those cars way back there at over the bridge, Norfolk and West and Norfolk Southern Bridge, you think, well, I got plenty of time to pull out and go westbound. No, you don't, because if you pull out, they are right on you. And then we're going to be going in not only to the right lane, but the left lane and going up, and like Randy said, getting in a little deceleration lane. The other factor on that is time of day. The sun in the west will blind you. These people flying up that road can't see with that sun in their eyes. Same thing in the mornings going eastbound. It's not as simple as it sounds. So I got a whole lot more to say, but I guess I better not. But my question is, can you all guarantee us that this project is going to make us safer? Because our fear is it's going to make things worse. And we have thought about this, and all of us here, and I'm so thankful to see all of our neighbors here that have talked about this and prayed about this, that we don't think we'll be as safe as we are now. So we're asking you to please, do a resolution, stop the project, and use the money a better way. We're doing just fine where we are, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Rhonda.
All right, next up we have David Graves, and after that, Tanner Stanley.
Hi, I'm David Graves. I live in Huddleston, but I own Woodhaven Nursing Home, and I oppose this VDOT proposed project. It seems to me, if you've driven on this road, 460, you realize that the alignment of the eastbound and the westbound lanes is tremendous. And so the simple solution for me is get the asphalt truck and raise the westbound lanes and get the scraper and lower the eastbound lane just a little bit, making the crossover alignment more negotiable and create better line of sight. And I think everyone in this room would agree that aligning the lanes would be the best solution. Creating these turnaround lanes is just, in my humble opinion, a shovel-ready project, I guess, or some type of project that's going to create more hazards. It's going to be very inconvenient for my staff who are coming and going from work every day of the year. So I would just encourage the board to focus on the problem, which is aligning the highway so that you get the desired result. Thank you.
David. Tanner Stanley, then up would be Ken Arthur.
My name is Tanner Stanley, and I live at 1066 Camp JC Road, and I object this project because I have farming equipment that will stick out in the road when going to the next turn, in which that is not safe at all. What we have now is much safer because I can see both ways, and when they're clear, then I can take off. And if I go up to the next one, like they said, I'm gonna have coming to a stop and have my trailers out in the middle of the road when, you know, time of morning, because, you know, they always say farmers get up with chickens and go to bed with the chickens. So, you know, people won't be able to see my trailers sticking out. And then, you know, I also see where on the VDOT proposal that they are trying to move my fence across my main cattle source of water. And my grandfather, which owned it before us, was farming there for 40-some years and never had a trouble. And I just think doing that will cause a lot more wrecks than what it's doing now. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. All right, we got Ken Arthur up, and then I believe it's Douglas Kay.
Good evening. My name's Ken Arthur. I live at 1314 Matthew Talbot Road in Forest, Virginia. I actually came in support of the project, and I want to tell you a couple of reasons why. A lot of local people that work really hard to get the funding that comes to Bedford County and our area. Lynchburg, Roanoke, really everything up in the valley, Bristol is a very underfunded part of the program. And I know I'm getting close on time, but I would just ask the board to keep that in mind. If this goes to CTB, we don't want the folks that are trying to get that money locally to feel like Bedford County is a tough place to do business. We want to get all the money that we can. I know of that $3.7 million, only $800,000 is earmarked for Salem District. And when I say Salem District, that's 12 counties. So whether that will come back to Bedford County, it's hard to say. I know a lot of other municipalities and counties that would love to have it. That other $2.7 million that the young lady mentioned that was, I forget the name for it, but that will go right back into the regular fund for the entire state, which will most likely go into the urban crescent. So this isn't money that can just be reassigned to something in Bedford. Just want to make the board aware. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ken. All right, next up we have Douglas Kay, followed by Debbie Kay.
All right. This will take a little bit of time. In June of 2020, I'm Douglas Kay. I live on Dewey Road. We use Camp JC for ingress and egress. In June of 2021, concerned citizens sounded the alarm that VDOT was moving to close the crossover at US 460 and SR 697, among others, and met twice at the CRI shelter at former Camp JC to discuss how to oppose the closings. At the first meeting, we were given an accident history list provided by VDOT as the basis for such an impactful and permanent change to our simple ingress and egress. The accident history
spans 8 years but had not been vetted for accidents due to crossover traffic or to even prove the accidents happened at SR 697. Of the 20 accidents listed, 14 were in the eastbound lanes of US 460, with many far away and one even 9/10 of a mile from Camp JC Road. The eastbound accidents seemed to be drivers who fell victim to the treachery of the curve, deer and debris, and vehicles hydroplaning or sliding in bad weather. There was a side swiper. There was one fatality, a nighttime accident where the driver failed to navigate the curve of eastbound 460. 2 were rear-enders when cars stopped for down wires far away. 6 accidents occurred at the intersection. 4 drivers turning right towards Roanoke, trying to get out in traffic ahead of vehicles, lost the race. This will not change by closing the crossover. There are only 2 accidents, 2, that involve the crossover. One on 5/29/2014 tried unsuccessfully to beat westbound traffic coming across those lanes from the crossover. One with all that visibility and reaction time. This was very likely entirely human error. On February the 8th, 2015, a motorist rear-ended another preparing to turn into the crossover. The fact that this project has been approved with a data error rate of 666.67% in their documentation supports a rush to judgment. Yield time?
I'd like to yield my time. I'm Deborah Kay to Douglas Kay.
I can give you 1 more minute.
Okay. After a 55-mile-per-hour slog through Montvale in the westbound lanes, law-abiding drivers get a long downhill curve and a hike in the speed limit just around the bend before the railroad bridge. Some less law-abiding drivers are already going over 55 miles an hour. This may be good news to some officials who have vocalized their desire to see US 460 become Bedford County's interstate. When turning out of Camp JC Road, one can see clearly for the best part of half a mile, except for the poorly placed signage. Still, a partially obstructed half-mile view is better than no view at all. Moving the crossover closer to the railroad bridge deprives drivers of both visibility and reaction time as the onslaught of vehicles pops into view just past the bridge. Do you have a minute left?
I gave you that minute.
But does she still have a minute
No,
left?
she's yielded. We're already way past our 15 minutes.
Okay. Well,
So if you'd wrap up with your final thought there, please.
I've got a lot more because I thought this issue was important enough and life-saving enough to invest 5 pages in it. I've only been through 2.
Okay. Appreciate you sharing. All right. That would conclude our citizen comment time this evening. We will move on through our agenda. Next up is the consent agenda minus item A. So Mr. Hiss, if you'd share with us.
Yeah, with the removal of item A, that leaves 3 different agenda items on their consent agenda. Item B is a resolution authorizing the submission, acceptance, and appropriation of a Department of Motor Vehicles Selective Enforcement Police Traffic Services grant for the Sheriff's Office. Item C is a resolution authorizing the submission, acceptance, and appropriation of a Creative Community Partnership grant application to the Virginia Commission for the Arts. And item D is authorizing the county administrator to execute task proposals to complete various solid waste facility paving projects.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I noticed, and also to Mr. Hiss.
I mean, where's the?
Yes, I have. So this takes a while to time through. I haven't had time to get that in the process and through the whole process that it would take to get that on the list.
But we'll get it on the list soon.
It will get on the list.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion for the adoption.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Bansley. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That passes. On to the approval of our minutes from the December 12th, 2022 meeting and the January 9th, 2023 meeting. Are there any questions or corrections for that? If not, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for December 12th, 2022 and January 9th, 2023.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Parker for both sets of minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Let's see, we have no public hearings and presentations tonight. That moves us on to our action items. First up is consideration of a resolution authorizing the county administrator to execute a contract to complete the Montvale Library roof replacement, Resolution R031323-08. Mr. Kaufman.
Good evening. Y'all might recall back in 2021, we advertised a roof replacement bid. It was elected not to proceed with that at the time. Based on discussions with the board and some comments from the board, we decided to go ahead and rebid that work and put it here for your consideration this evening. We got two competitive bids through an open competitive bid solicitation process. SG Young Contracting was the apparent low bidder with a bid of $114,250. That system would come with a 20-year warranty on the roofing system. The existing roof at Montvale does have issues. We have been patching it to buy time while a decision was made as how best to proceed. So y'all can decide whether you would like to move forward with this.
Okay. Any questions from the board for Mr. Kaufman? Thank you. Any discussion from the board on this particular resolution?
Doug, I do have a question. Is there anything in that to finish the building that's attached adjacent to the library, that part of the building?
No, sir. This currently is just for the portion covering the library itself.
Is that a project or a topic for another time? Is that, because I thought we discussed that.
We did, but, until we hear something back from some of these grant submissions and, kind of the, if we're successful with this grant commission, they're able to do kind of a master plan for the building, would probably be the best time to revisit that.
And as I understand it, it sounds like the folks that are working on that school preservation have actually done some pretty good patchwork on that portion of the building. Is that right?
Yes, sir. They have done some work and patched that roof.
Thanks,
yes.
Doug. Mr. Chair, I move that we approve resolution R03132308.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Davis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Parker. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. All right. Next up is the consideration of a resolution rescinding support for the Camp JC Intersection Improvement Smart Scale Project, Resolution R031323-09, presented by County Engineer Mr. Smedley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you noted, the item up for consideration is a rescission of the resolution of support for the Camp JC Smart Scale Project. As discussed at the previous board meeting, this board may request to cancel the project, which would then bring the item to the Commonwealth Transportation Board for their consideration on a final decision whether to cancel it or not. VDOT has spent approximately $200,000 to date on this project for preliminary engineering work. If the project was to be canceled, VDOT could come back to the county for those costs. In addition, the county would need to work with VDOT to find the solution to address safety at this location. VDOT does recognize a safety need at this location. So if the CTB were to consider canceling the project, we would have to put forward an acceptable alternative for their consideration. There are project drawings in the brochure from VDOT's public hearing, included in your board packet. And I also would be happy to pull up the project drawings on the TV screens here if you'd like me to step through the project. Otherwise, I'd be happy to take any questions that you all may have.
Well, Mr. Smedley, a question that Ms. Maxey proposed, I think bears worth asking again. VDOT is not willing to guarantee that changing the road out there will make it safer.
So based on the data that is available, I believe the proposed design solutions would address some of those safety concerns. I can't speak to whether VDOT is willing to put a guarantee on that or not, but as was noted, the smart scale process is data-driven, and the solutions are based on that data. So their intent is to address the crash safety history based on that
I'm
data.
having a hard time understanding why they want to close Camp JC crossover when the vast majority of the accidents have happened away from the intersection. And what they're talking about when the folks that have spoken mentioned the curve, it is the downhill slope coming from Roanoke, from the west, in other words, heading eastbound. And what happens is folks get off the road, there is no shoulder there. You go from the asphalt right onto the grass, which certainly, that would be the first suggestion I would make to the CTB to correct that issue there, because folks are coming down that hill in a curve, picking up speed. They run off the road, particularly in times of high moisture, and they get into the median, and there's been multiple accidents there. And then, as Doug pointed out, the rear end accidents that occurred from someone stopping for debris in the road, a power line in the road. And when you look at the data itself, there's only been, the best I can find is in 10 years, 5 accidents directly related to the intersection. And one of them was Mrs. Maxey's mother, who had some form of a health issue as she was at the intersection, and no one really knows what happened. And in 10 years, you've got 22 accidents there, with 15 of them being completely unrelated to the crossover, best I can tell. And by the way, I asked Mr. King, our Salem representative, because I said, why is Timber Ridge not been done? They had 58 crashes there in 10 years, 56 crashes in 8 years, which is 3 times more crashes than at Camp JC Road. And many of them far more serious at Timber Ridge. And his answer was good. I have it here on my phone. That, the state just didn't have enough funding to put into Timber Ridge, so they thought, well, we'll do Camp JC Road, where there's only been 5 accidents at the intersection compared to 56. Help me understand that. And this project was approved by the board in 2018 when I was not a member of the board. I certainly would have fought against it adamantly then. We wouldn't be sitting here tonight having this discussion. And we had the opportunity to turn it around a year ago, and the same folks that are here tonight were here then. The fact of the matter is, when you pull out from Camp JC Road, I don't see the representative from VDOT who I had to speak to I went to the presentation. The only thing this man could tell me from VDOT that would make the crossover safer was that he insisted on this. He even followed me out to my pickup truck, wouldn't let me go. He said, what makes it safer is when someone pulls out on 460, instead of crossing over, they make a right turn. Now, and that way they'll only suffer a glancing blow if they get hit. Help me understand the logic behind spending $4 million for something that silly. So I'm sitting at Camp JC Road, prepared to pull out across 460 so I can make a left-hand turn and go eastbound. So I look to my left, and I clearly see 2 cars coming at probably 60 miles an hour out of Montvale. And I say, I could beat them, and I pull into the median. Then I'm prepared to make my left turn pulling out on the 460. So there's two opportunities for getting hit there, but I've clearly got a tremendously good view of a half a mile looking to the east. Then I sit in the medium, I make sure no one's coming, I pull on out. Now, if I'm going to have to do what VDOT is proposing, I've got to pull out on a 460 with those two cars coming, for instance, at 60 miles an hour, make a right turn in the right lane, start to accelerate. As I accelerate, those two cars are approaching closer. Now those two guys, one beside the other, are going to have to decide, okay, which one of us is going to pass this dude? So I pull into the left lane, and as I pull into the left lane, I fail to realize that the guy that was in the left lane suddenly got in the blind spot of my car, and I hit him, and now we've got an accident and probably take out all three of us. If that's not enough, I make it safely into the left lane. Now I have to slow down, and that guy's on his cell phone texting, and he doesn't look up in time to see, and he smashes into the rear end of me. That is 3 points for an accident. 1 when I pull out, 2 when I get in the blind spot, number 3 when I cross over. Now I've got to cross over the intersection. I've got to pull across 460. Now how does that make it better? Because you only had to cross 460 and get on your way. Instead, now we've got to take these chances going to the west, cross over, and then go across 2 lanes, get into the merging lane that VDOT's going to put there. I've got to come back out on, so I get a chance to get, hit in the door there. Then I've got to come out and I get a chance to get hit in the rear end again, probably a couple times, or even turn into someone who's in my blind spot. So, I realize that we're faced with $200,000 here possibly, but I will tell you this. In 2018, I've listened to the audio from that meeting, and there was erroneous information presented there. The best information that was presented, the most truthful, was what Mr. Daniel said when he said when you cross over Camp JC intersection there, is that if you've got a truck that has a lower center of gravity, it might high center on that, and a truck with a trailer would have to turn. Now, I will say this too. When I walked into the meeting with VDOT the other night at the Montville School, I saw a guy walking out the door, and he seemed to be pretty happy. I said, well, what did you think about the crossover closing? He said, I think it's a great idea. I go, really? Tell me, where are you from? He goes, Radford. I go, Radford? What are you doing here? He said, oh, I'm a road builder. Now, of course, we had Mr. Arthur speak here tonight as well. And I thought it was rather convenient that a road builder from this area would, I doubt he studied the accident reports. I seriously do, because he mentioned all the accidents at that crossover as if he knew. And I will remind you all too, when I spoke to Robert O'Brien, who he's one of the owners of Lynchburg Ready Mix, and he's in a position to have influence over this. I said, Robert, why would you be in favor of closing that crossover? All the fatalities. I said, where'd you get your information? And the person he named works for Boxley. So you look at the information. The facts do not bear this out, and it's unfortunate that in 2018 the board listened to the information, because in that presentation by VDOT there was a direct comparison made between Timber Ridge, which we all know is terribly dangerous, and Camp JC Road. And I can't believe that these folks here have to put up with that. I've spoken to a former United States congressman, and he can't believe this is happening. And I will say this, I'm absolutely opposed to wasting money. But I would not sit up here tonight. I represent these people, but if I didn't, I'd still be in favor of this position of rescinding this decision. And I hope that the rest of my board members here tonight will agree with me on this, or certainly I can get a majority, because this is the wrong thing to do, to close this intersection, and we need to rescind the project.
Understood, and I certainly can't dispute much of what you're saying. A couple items
None of it.
I want to touch on. In regards to Timber Ridge, that project was also submitted under that round of Smart Scale. It scored lower than the Camp JC project.
No, sir. That's not true. I have it here from Ken King.
So the score is a function of the cost. And
Yeah.
the Camp JC project
Cost-wise.
is at $3.7 million, and Timber Ridge Road was at $10 million. and change.
Let's be clear on this. It's from a safety standpoint, there's no comparison.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing him.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please say that again?
So the Timber Ridge Road project was about a $10 million dollar magnitude project. Camp JC was $3.7 million. The scoring for Smart Scale is a function of the cost, with the intent to try and maximize the dollars that are available to address as many needs as possibly can be addressed. I certainly recognize there is a need for something at Timber Ridge Road, but it did score lower, largely due to the cost in that round of Smart Scale. And I think part of the intent of the scope of this project is not only to reduce the number of accidents, but also to try and reduce the severity of those accidents. The angle crashes caused by making left turns typically can result in a much more severe crash than some of the other crashes that would be present under the potential new scope here. But
The problem is not with angle crashes at Camp J.C. Road. The majority of the accidents, again, if you will study the reports, happen in the eastbound lane coming down the hill, and Camp J.C. Road enters onto the westbound lane, Mr. Smedley.
Understood.
Have you been there?
I have been there. This is not an intersection that I regularly drive through, so I certainly can't really speak to the disruption to traffic flow that the folks out there may be experiencing that would result from this project.
Ms. Mansley?
How are left turns coming out of a R U-turn more safe than crossing a road and making a U-turn?
So, Todd, I'll take us. Sure, go ahead.
So, Ms. Bainsley, to answer your question, it's when I'm coming out of Camp JC as an example, and I'm wanting to go eastbound, no doubt I'm looking left, I'm looking to the east to see what's coming to impact me from that direction, but I'm also looking to the west, what's coming down the hill. You can stop in that intersection if you're a single vehicle. I would question whether you could stop with a trailer, and I know some folks don't try to traverse it with a trailer because it could high point, as Mr. Davis said. But you're only, in the U-turn, you're worried about one direction, whereas if you're coming out of Camp JC today, as we see it, you worry about two directions. So it's about attention to both directions versus one. No doubt, there's a lot of opinions here. Mr. Davis, I appreciate your opinion and many in the audience, and I know some of these folks personally.
Question for you, Mr. Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Is the crossover at Camp J.C. Road the only crossover on 460 where you have 2 points of concern?
Absolutely not.
You mean, you're saying other crossovers have that as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
just want to make that clear.
Yeah. What I was going to say, it's not our intent to shove a project down someone's throat, my words. Fact of the matter is the county applied for it. Now, going back in time to 2018, Mr. Davis, you referenced that, the county was looking to improve the intersection. It showed up as a safety need on what is a VTrans map. VTrans is our transportation planning group that falls under the Secretary of Transportation. So they've got mapped and they've got all this data, and we use a lot of data, admittedly. And that because we don't live on every road. Now, I live in Bedford County, and no doubt we could apply this money somewhere else, but for smart scale rules won't allow us to do that. So we look at VTrans needs, the county looks at VTrans needs. With VDOT's help, the county staff comes up with ideas. Where can we make improvements? Where can we make improvements that have a chance to score well enough in smart scale to receive the funding? Sometimes it's a strategy. The idea at first was, hey, let's I think Mr. Kay mentioned it and some others, let's adjust the grade on 460. Let's put a left turn lane in at Camp JC. And let me tell you, if we could, we would. The problem is that when you go to that level of construction, it's not quite as simple as just raising by paving westbound or cutting eastbound. It's not quite that simple. You're getting into tens of millions of dollars, and I don't know what the estimated cost would be, but it would be economically unrealistic for us to expect to get that project through smart scale.
I would just like to know the point. The folks that look at this data, Mr. Daniel, again, in 10 years, there's been 5 accidents directly related to that intersection. 21 years, 9. The gentleman that I spoke to or that spoke to me and followed me out to my pickup trying to convince me of this project's benefits is not here this evening. But how is that going to help the problem where the folks are coming down the hill as from the west, coming eastbound, how is this gonna help them? Because you're not gonna fix that problem with the crossover closing at Camp JC's. I appreciate you're talking about how to fix a crossover, but it doesn't need fixing. That's what every single person from Camp JC Road will tell you who's lived on there for 40 or 50 years even and have crossed that road. And if, again, the crash data at the crossover does not support it. I mean, for all practical purposes, you might say, we're going to close Camp JC Road for accidents that happen up closer to Roanoke. Because you're still not going to fix them by closing Camp JC crossover.
Yeah, I'll try to answer part of your question, Mr. Davis. What the closure would do would be to force the traffic to go to use Fluff Lane. Many in the audience know this. We would close the crossover that's near Juanita, ultimately close Camp JC, 2 others, and put in some other U-turn movements. So as you're coming eastbound, you would have a turn lane at Fluff Road. That's the change. That already exists. That doesn't require construction. The lack of a left turn lane or a deceleration lane, whatever you want to call it, is the issue going eastbound. If we could get a left turn lane in, and trust me, we explored that at your request, Mr. Hiss's request. Our staff in Salem explored that at length. How can we do that? Mr. King, you referenced, he's our district engineer. He asked us, he told us, we need to figure out if we can do this. Physically and economically, it's impractical, just because of the grade separation of 460. If that wasn't there, and you got to work with me a minute here, so Camp JC's got 420 vehicles a day on it. It's very low volume. But let's say we were working on an intersection that had greater traffic and we wanted to implement this R-cut because we'd had crashes. Typically, we would allow the left turns in. That's the typical R-cut design. We only restrict the left outs because you're crossing over 2 directions of travel on a divided highway and you have that broadside possibility. We can't do that here, unfortunately, because of the physical characteristics of the road. We would love to, and it would have been part of the proposal at the beginning if we could, but we can't.
I appreciate your talking about R-cuts, so forth. As a matter of fact, I remember Ms. Bansley, when you proposed an R-cut at 811 in her district, she adamantly was opposed to it, if I'm not mistaken about that.
Would that one, the one that's going into the market there, would that be a left in?
At Owens Market at Blackwater, yes, ma'am. So that, obviously,
one's
that allows, that proposal allows the left turn in. There's already a left turn lane there. It'll be improved. And you turn left into Blackwater. But you cannot turn left out of Blackwater with that proposal. You'll have to make a right, go eastbound. It's a crossover there now. It actually gets moved just a touch to some property that the Sims is on. And you have a turnaround at that one.
Off the top of your hand what the traffic is on that?
Oh, I wish I didn't look that up. 668 it's more than Camp JC. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. And you know, we've got Owens Market there.
Well, that includes Owens Market, right?
Yeah, we got Owens Market there. We've got the recycle, the dumpster down in Blackwater. So it gets a lot of traffic that Camp JC wouldn't otherwise get.
On Camp, I'm talking about Camp JC Road again. Mr. Daniel, you mentioned there needs to be a left turn lane there and seemed to indicate that would prevent rear-end crashes. I don't see rear-end crashes on the 10-year report that I've got, nor on the 20-year report. There's been some as you travel westbound for people coming from Montvale and as someone turned into Camp JC Road. But the crashes in the eastbound lane happened where people were coming down the hill before they even got near the intersection and they ran off the road again where there is no shoulder. I will remind you, there's no, the only rear-end crashes that I recall from the report, I can pull it here, I've got it beside me, was where someone stopped for debris in the road and there was a deer in the road. In both cases, they got hit from behind, but that has nothing to do with the intersection, with the crossover at Camp JC Road. And I don't see how anyone in their right mind can justify spending $4 million to close the crossover and make it even more unsafe for motorists. Again, I've already mentioned, I won't bring it up again, how you've got at least 5 times more chances of getting hit by doing what VDOT is proposing. And in addition to that, I think in the discussion, when I asked you, could I turn my crew cab pickup around in those crossovers that you all were building, and I was told no. And I find that extremely impractical as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Daly, I think you talked about your truck and a trailer together.
Well, you said that you couldn't pull more than a 16-foot trailer with a pickup, and I said, what about with a crew cab? And I don't have anything shorter than 20 feet, and some are even longer. But the point is I'm not trying to make a crossover with those trucks and trailers myself, but as this young man who farms up there pointed out, the longer he stays on 460, the better chance. I don't know if this Arthur man is any kin to Buck Arthur, who used to run Templeton Paving, but Buck was hit on 29 by a car traveling 60 miles an hour. Fortunately, he was on a 100 horsepower tractor, but you know, we do need to make it quicker for folks to get across the road. And the only reason that I heard in favor of closing the crossover at Camp JC was to prevent a direct impact accident, which there's only been 2. And one of them was where someone ran the stoplight from Camp JC onto 460, and the other one was the older woman. So trying to force people to change their patterns when they've been driving this for 40 and 50 years, and they've been paying their taxes in this county, I think we deserve to give them the respect and the consideration for this project to be rescinded. No matter how many arguments you can make for it, I would never believe, I believe you, Mr. Daniel, but I would never believe you when you tell me this project will make it safer. I don't care how much computer-generated data you can throw at me.
Yes, sir.
I would just say that scenario you gave, because I do an R-cut out of my neighborhood. The scenario you gave where the 2 cars were coming, I would never have pulled out. I would just wait for those cars to go, and then I would have pulled out when I had a lane.
Not everybody's as safe as you are, Charlotte.
Well, I have an R-cut that I have to, I have an R-cut that I navigate. I navigate it to get here tonight, so.
Mr. Daniel,
Yes, ma'am.
just one question. Since most of the problems seem to be from the eastbound lane and trying to make that left through the median to go to Camp JC, that you can't, so you don't have a deceleration lane, would there be any way to not allow left turns at that? And if you just did not let people coming from Roanoke heading that direction, that median, you could not be a no left turn at that median because you don't have the deceleration lane, and then those people could go down to the next one and turn around and come back where there is more of a line of vision. I mean, just to me, and I'm not VDOT, I'm not an engineer, but just if you didn't allow, that seemed to, that would cut out really the problem area. Would that be doable?
We can do lots of things to restrict movements, whether it's turning out or in or what have you. So the answer to your question is yes, you can restrict that in other ways, whether it be a sign or some other physical restriction. But I would add that we talked about Blackwater, and I realize this is a Camp JC discussion, but Blackwater is a great example. We're allowing the left ends because that is typically not the problem movement. Now, I freely admit that we don't have the number of crashes at Camp JC as we do Timber Ridge or Blackwater. I don't have the Blackwater data with me. But also realize that there is over 3 times the traffic on Timber Ridge as there is on Camp JC. I'm giving you data. So when you have more traffic, and there's also more traffic on 460, the further you go east, the volumes go up. But as you add more cars, in theory, your crash number should go up if the rate is similar. So nobody's debating that there's fewer number of crashes at Timber Ridge. Back to your question. So we can restrict it with a sign. We can restrict with other physical methods. I don't know all of them. But you would still be allowing the left out. To VDOT, based on all the studies that folks do on these type of movements, these intersections, that is the more problematic movement, typically, for a T intersection or an intersection coming into a divided highway, is the left out of the side street, which obviously closing the intersection, the crossover would eliminate
Parker,
that.
if I may, Ms. Parker, again, I'll remind the board and everyone here present, although you folks don't need it, that there's not an issue with folks getting hit as they decelerate to turn left coming from the west on the eastbound lane. Charlie Gill's not here this evening, is he? Mr. Gill, how old are you?
I'm 85.
Mr. Gill lives on Camp J.C. Road, and I've come to know him. And he told me that when he is coming from the west on the eastbound lane, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, that he'll look in his mirror like any intelligent person does. I know I do that when I live off of 460, and when I go around the Thaxton Market, the traffic's very heavily. I look in my rear view mirror, and when I see people close to me or coming up behind me, I'll start to flip my turn blinker, letting them know that I'm going to turn, because I can't drive beyond my road and turn around and come back. I'll even wave my arm in the air like I do when I'm driving a short track race on Saturday night. Now, Mr. Gill, he'll look in his mirror, and and others have told me the same thing, if they see someone behind them, they will, in fact, of their own volition, they don't need a VDOT sign to tell them to do this. They've got good heads on their shoulders. They'll drive on past the intersection and cross over at Camp J.C. Road and go down near the bridge and make a turn and come back. So that's been working very fine. And again, there's no rear-end collisions from the eastbound lane to support closing this crossover. And it's pure speculation saying that making people make a right turn and go up the road and then come back down the road, it's purely speculative that it will make it safer. And it's a huge waste of money to speculate. It's almost like socialism, whereas if we say, if we just try it another way, it'll work.
Anyone else have any more questions for Mr. Daniel?
I do.
Yes.
When y'all did this safety study, you have to take in consideration future, right? I mean, like, when you do a safety study, you don't go by just what happens up to that point. You go by probably the volume of traffic that's going to be added to 460 over the next 5, 10, 15 years. I'm assuming you do that. And so the people that do these safety studies, do they compare that with same like intersections and stuff like that to come up with the reasons they suggest these crossovers be closed or redirected or whatever?
Mr. Scott, I don't know if I can answer specific yes to everything you asked, but I'll answer it this way. So when we do a safety review, we're looking at history. What's happened over, usually it's a 5-year period, and for this particular smart scale application, that period was January 1, 2013 to December 31, 2017. The fatal that happened in the eastbound, where that was actually run off the road and the vehicle rolled over, that was in January of 18. The smart scale group included that in this review. So we look back in history, what's happened, that's anywhere. Every fatal gets an automatic review. Anyone could call me and say, hey, I'd like you to do a speed limit study or a safety study on my route. Typically, we'll do them, unless we did it in the last 5 years and nothing's changed. But we've got data to back up what we've done previously. And then for these projects, when we plan, we do look to the future. So you'll see on our cover sheets in our plans, in fact, it's got a out-year prediction for traffic volumes. I don't know what it is on 460, but I can tell you that as time goes on, volumes will go up. We plan for those volumes to go up. Otherwise, we would be behind when we started. Also, there's been multiple studies of the 460 corridor dating back likely into the 90s. I know there was one in 04, 05 range. It highlighted several intersections and several crossovers that needed attention on 460. Several that need closing. Intersections that need attention, whether it be a turn lane or some type of treatment to improve safety for the future. We talked about, or somebody brought up the New London, Mr. Davis did. You know, does it need it today? Does that intersection fail today at New London and New London Road in 460? No, it does not. I don't know what grade it gets today. Let's call it a C for conversation. It's not failing. What we know is as growth occurs on 460 and our side streets, and it's definitely occurring in New London and Forest, it will fail. And what it means is when it fails is I can't get through that light through one cycle. Maybe I wait 2, maybe I wait 3. So we try to stay ahead of that curve, if you will. No doubt these things are unpopular sometimes, but we are trying to maintain and improve safety throughout the whole corridor, not just at one intersection. We look at all of them. When we get money for a given project, we try to utilize it in the best manner possible. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I happen to drive that highway in that area a lot. And, you know, when you talk about an angle or an elevation change, Beale Trail Road is by far the very worst. I've actually considered when I'm on my motorcycle making a right turn out of there and going to where the ground is flat to the west of there, because the elevation change, and even the fact when you're sitting in that median you can't see, there's no visibility from the traffic coming from the west. I mean, that would have been probably a better project to have changed than the S-curves, because since the S-curves have been changed, there's been more accidents recently than before. But getting back to Camp J.C. Road, I've said it so many times this evening. You say the best use of state money. I think this is a colossal waste of state money. It goes against the taxpayers that live in that area, that drive on that road, that have lived there for so long, and even those who have lost loved ones on that road. And there's the crossover itself shows no reason to be closed. And just because someone unfortunately got killed coming down the hill because they ran off the road, maybe what VDOT should look at doing is putting a shoulder there with some asphalt on the left-hand side of the road in the median, because if you run off the road, there is no asphalt median, it's grass. And once you get into grass, I've learned this on road courses, at 170 miles an hour, you pick up speed.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Daniel? Okay. Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just had a couple procedural comments, if I can just have a minute.
Sure.
And a couple of these Eric touched on. Number one is whatever action, particularly if the Board of Supervisors takes action to rescind this project, at the end of the day, this is really a decision by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So it doesn't end here. This would be a request, essentially, to the Commonwealth Transportation Board to consider canceling the project. So that's number one. Number two, in order to really be successful with the Commonwealth Transportation Board, we need to signal our willingness to pay that $200,000 approximately if VDOT asks us to do that, the county to do that. So we'll need to be clear that we're willing to pay that amount. I guess the good news is that if the board votes to rescind this project tonight, we've got reassurance from the Salem district staff that they won't engage in any new activities in order to keep the charges going. Basically they'll essentially freeze the project until the Commonwealth Transportation Board makes a decision. But then number three is, this is something really just learned this afternoon, is VDOT and the county has, in past decisions, has decided that there are safety concerns at this intersection. So for the Commonwealth Transportation Board to rescind this project, there's going to have to be some alternative proposed. That would be basically ends up being kind of a downscope of the project, some level of partial safety improvements. Now that's a big gray area as to what that may look like. It could be very minimal. It could be something still considerable, but certainly less than what the $3.7 million that's been allocated to this project has been. So the Commonwealth Transportation Board is going to want to see a recommendation from the county and the Salem District Office of some safety improvement to this intersection. It doesn't have to be the exact design. Like I said, it'll be a downscope of what has already been proposed, but something that the Commonwealth Transportation Board can feel comfortable that some level of safety improvements are being proposed. So those are just 3 comments for consideration before you make decisions.
Thank
Thank you.
I have a question for Robert. If they come back and ask us for safety suggestions, I guess, for the better way to look at it, would they be looking for us to fund these suggestions?
That's a good question, and I don't know if Todd or Eric wants to help me with that because they've been part of these conversations. I don't get the impression that they will. I believe that it would be it'd be something that we funded most likely through the Salem district, but it kind of depends on what the scope of that is, and is a little bit undetermined at this point.
This partner actually was a little bit ahead of the game in asking the question that she did ask. We did have a discussion with our Commonwealth Transportation Board representative, Dr. Ray Smoot, today, specifically about this project. As Mr. Hiss was saying, there's a couple steps to this. The board vote tonight is one of those steps, the first step. Then what does the CTB do is the next step, and that's yet to be determined. And then the future safety improvement of whatever scale or magnitude that it might be, that we strategize and work together to try to figure out. I don't know that there is an answer to, does the county have to fund that? I think it's possible, but I couldn't commit to that tonight. I think that's very much up for discussion, and you know, the department and Dr. Ray Smoot would be a big part of that, trying to figure out what have we got money to do in the district? What's the county working with us to accomplish? And then, you know, we can talk about funding or how we fund it at that point. I don't have a good answer for you to your question, but that's what we talked about today.
Mr. Hiss, you said the county and VDOT. Who in the county would have been dealing with this issue besides?
I think that remains to be determined. I mean, I think.
Well, you said the county and VDOT decided that something still needed to be done.
Well,
who was in that meeting? Because I'm assuming you had a meeting about it.
Originally, or
well,
now?
you just said a moment ago. You said the county and VDOT decided that something still needed to be done. I just was unclear on that. Can you please clarify that?
No, what I said was originally the county in 2018 and
Okay.
VDOT decided that the safety improvements need to be made.
Thank you.
And now, if this project is rescinded with a recognition that some level of safety improvement need to be made, VDOT's still going to expect and want to make some
Understand.
level of partial safety improvement.
I was just, thank you for clarifying that.
I do have one question. That is, if all of the other parts of this project, I mean, I'm looking at some of the crossovers being closed, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them that I'm seeing. It's part of this overall project that I'm seeing. Could the rest of the project be done, you know, the left-hand deceleration lane, you know, be able to do the U-turn, all of that? Could all of that be done and the other crossovers closed and just leave open the crossover at Camp J.C. Road?
So Mr. Hiss actually, through our many discussions about this over the past couple of years or year or plus, asked that question in a similar question. So can it? Yes. The problem, Mr. Sharp, is that would require a rescore of the project because you would be taking a major part of the project out of the scope, if you will. So if we ignore or don't touch Camp JC crossover specifically, we do the other work, you haven't eliminated the left turn in or the left turn out, which the left turn out is the major movement that generally causes the most severe crashes. The left out. That's based on our data.
Just for clarity's sake, not at Camp J.C. Road, because we have no record of except two accidents.
Yeah, when I
in 20
talk
years.
about the movements of a given intersection, it is definitely in general. But typically on any roadway, when you turn left out of it, you're exposing yourself. And that's where you get your severe crashes. When someone had, Mr. Davis, you mentioned a glancing blow or ever how it was termed to you, you know, that is generally a less severe crash. So make no mistake about it. Will there be a crash at Camp JC no matter what we do? probably, likely, of some sort, because we can't control driver error. We can't stop driver error, right? But what we know, what we believe, let me say that, what we believe based on the data, based on these type of treatments being implemented in other intersections across the country, they reduce the severity of the crashes. So we have less severe injuries. That's our goal. Less fatals, or zero fatals, and severe injuries. Ms. Sharp, can it be done? Yes, based on what I've been told, that will cause us to have to rescore the project, and likely it will not, they won't allow that to happen. It's hard for me they won't allow that to happen and the project move forward as it is today. So there may still be ramifications for the county, if that's the county's proposal.
Yeah, it's just that if the county has to, try to solve the problem, then if we proposed, hey, do everything you're doing except close that one crossover, that would be a proposal.
It would be, yes, sir. Mr. Hiss, I don't know, you asked Mr. King that, specifically about allowing the left outs. I forget exactly how Mr. Hiss worded it, but we did answer that, Mr. King did, that wasn't allowable within the smart scale process.
Yeah, I think he was saying that at that point in time, I think it was changing the original scope too greatly, I suppose, and the cost benefit would be out of kilter with the scoring matrix. But I think to your point, Mr. Sharp, is if the board rescinded the project or wanted to rescind the project, then I'm not sure exactly how that coordinates with smart scale scoring going forward. Because, like I said, we have to come up with an alternative that would be acceptable.
The way I'm understanding it, then we can't come up with an alternative by what you just said, because that's an alternative.
That's a
but
reasonable alternative, I think.
That's not an acceptable alternative, so we can't really come up with an alternative. I don't know how you do it, and then you're charged with an alternative, but our alternative's not acceptable.
If I may, we've talked this thing a lot, and coming up with an alternative this evening is probably the last thing we're going to be able to do, although I certainly appreciate the attempt at it. I mean, we could make suggestions all night long, from signage to how about a flashing yellow light, which is so commonly done to warn people of a hazardous area, to warn people going down the hill with flashing lights as you come down the hill where the accidents actually happen, with a flashing yellow lights on the side of the road. But I think there are suggestions to me that would be valid, and I've heard some of these from the folks that live in Montville, and I think they've had some good ones as well.
Any other discussion up here?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think the citizens and everybody has some real good suggestions, but the whole thing in a nutshell is, no matter what we do up here tonight, we have no final say-so in it. It's VDOT's decision, and I'm not prepared to go against their safety study. I'm not the expert. A lot of people here tonight says it'll make it more hazardous to do this, more accidents will happen. But I'm not the expert, so I'm not going to go against VDOT's study because of the traffic on 460. Plus, we don't have a final say-so. Plus, we could end up paying $200,000 more if they request it. Plus, if we have to come up with an alternative, that's unclear. We might have to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. So, in my opinion, since VDOT has the final say-so, and the decision was made in 2018 to proceed with it, we should just leave it like it is.
I have a quick thing.
Yes.
Quick question. Smart scale, when we did that, it was a left-hand turn, couldn't be made. It was a turn lane that we originally asked for. Should we not even ask for smart scale anymore? Because if you guys come back with something that's different than what we asked for, then we end up with this.
No, I wouldn't recommend that, Ms. Baines, and I'll tell you some things we learned along the way. So 2018 was our third round of Smart Scale. Just if you bear with me for a little bit of history, Smart Scale goes back to 2014. The purpose, and Ms. Rhonda Maxey spoke about it because she did her research, it was to put the right project at the right place at the right time. Prior to that, our 6-year plan was a mess. Had a lot of, I'll call them pet projects, but anybody could talk to a legislature or a VDOT representative or a county administrator, hey, I want this project. It would get placed in a 6-year plan, and we literally might put $1 on the project. So it showed up in a publication as a VDOT 6-year plan. 20 years later, now I may be exaggerating a little bit, project's still sitting there, right? So our governor at the time in 2012, 2013, the VTCA, Virginia Transportation Construction Alliance, and the legislature saw a need. Let's do this right. So how do we do it? We score projects. We score projects based on data. Admittedly, is all the data perfect? Maybe not. We get it from the state. We don't document crashes. State police document crashes. It goes to DMV. We retrieve it from DMV. But it's part of our scoring process. It's part of the data. So if you just ignored Smart Scale, we wouldn't get, or you chose not to apply, we wouldn't have access to funding for a lot of good projects potentially in the future. There are a lot of needs in the county. There are a lot of needs in every county. We'll never tackle them all. We'll never tackle all of them, but we will be woefully behind if we don't apply for Smart Scale. Now, what happened as we move forward in time, and we learned this as part of Camp JC, in fact. So in the spring of the given application year, we'll work with county staff. We look at maps. We look at data. What's good projects? And in that particular year, I think it was April of 2018, some VDOT staff, some folks from Salem, and the county staff was there too, proposed these projects, this and a couple others. Yes, indeed, the left turn lane was the what everybody wanted. Where we failed, and when I say we, it's a large group of people, we didn't keep the residents of Camp JC informed, nor the board. And once again, I'm taking a little bit of this on my shoulders, but what we've changed is now the county, at our suggestion, reaches out to affected owners. So move forward to when we applied for Blackwater, the project that you referenced in Owens. They all got letters. The Timber Ridge application, all those property owners adjacent to the project got letters while the county was in process of developing those projects. So those folks had an opportunity to respond via phone, via letter, and I think we got a few, and voice their opinion. Now, we still may get pushback on those projects because that happens with any project, but that's changed. So in the future, I think the county will continue with this. They're going to reach out to the Rhonda Maxeys of the world because Rhonda lives adjacent to this project. She would have got a letter in 2018 if it was today. So,
Would you have taken her recommendation then at that time? Like when they, you have these meetings and they say, no, I don't want it, is that something that you actually take to heart?
Well, so I think where that would play in is with the county, because you all as a board, we require resolutions of support for a project to the county to submit an application.
Before.
Well, it does. However, in this case, y'all actually passed that resolution on April 9, 2018. The application wasn't actually submitted until August 8th of 2018, which is a typical process. We start in the spring, we get ideas, counties go to their boards at different times, they get resolutions of support, we continue to develop, and ultimately somebody clicks the submit button for that application. So I think what would have happened differently is the board would have heard from folks on Camp JC. Now, does it change where we are today? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. We listen to public input.
But at that point, it was just a turn lane.
Well, it initially started as a turn lane in the
At that point,
initial.
it was just a turn lane, and then it got to the point where it is now is an R cut. And that's why I'm saying maybe we don't even do these projects, because this is just going to keep on happening.
Yeah, but it was, when it was submitted in August, it was the design we're talking about today. So that April to August window.
In 18?
Yes, sir. Yeah, because it evolved
Did
through.
it ever come back to us for a vote before it was?
Not for a vote, no ma'am, not that I recall. No. And that's what I'm talking about is
That's
that,
the problem.
and I think y'all are getting briefings from the county more often. I know the county's reaching out to the citizens. I don't want to speak for county process, but there is more involvement back and forth during application development. And
Now.
that's, oh, yes.
Yeah,
Now.
we probably
Now,
have at least 2 to 3 work sessions with the Board of Supervisors about smart scale. And I may recall this past round, I know there was at least 2 projects we decided not to submit.
Right, because I was afraid this would happen.
The one at 811 and 460 and the roundabout. There may be another one, I don't remember. But yeah, there were, because of that process that Todd just described, we chose not to submit some projects this last round.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up, because it was in 2018 when the proposal came to this board. Well, 3 of us weren't on this board at the time. That's number 1. But number 2, to VDOT's acknowledgement, they've improved the process, because you learn as you go with a new process. But when it came to this board, the proposal was to make that deceleration lane to improve that. And somehow, and that's what the board approved. Yes, that sounds like a great idea. Let's move forward with that. So the Board of Supervisors at the time said, yes, we want to put that project on the list. Today, if that happened, VDOT's gotten a different, more information. You're sending the letters out to where.
Communication.
Yeah, the communication's gotten better to where the citizens would have been able to come and say, hey, don't do that if they're going to close it, because it went from, well, we're not going to do the turning lane to closing that median. So, so I think the process is definitely improved because communication has improved. But where the breakdown on this particular project was, the board thought it was approving a left deceleration lane off 460 onto the median, and when they found out that wasn't possible, probably financially or whatever, the topography of the land, the grading, whatever, that wasn't possible, it got changed after the approval process, and then that's why we're here today. And I feel like the process really has improved, and we have those concerns. And I know there was one project that they wanted to do, that 811 with all that turnaround, and I was like, no, we don't want to do that, because that's, don't want to say even submit it, because once you submit it, then it's on VDOT to do it, and you don't have any control. So I feel like that's where we're here, and I mean, I feel for the citizens, because I don't think they didn't get what they thought that they were getting with that approval.
Ms. Parker, I'll just add one point there. So this latest round of Smart Scale, we did hold a public hearing for citizens to come and speak on those projects. And at that public hearing, we presented the final concept designs that were ultimately submitted or not submitted, and presented for your resolution of support request.
Any other discussion here at the board level?
Yes. I appreciate Mr. Scott's comments and his fear over having to spend more than $200,000 should we vote to rescind this project. And the fact that we vote to rescind this project doesn't mean that it will be rescinded. I grew up during the development of the interstate highway transportation system in this country, and I lived on a magnificent farm in central Ohio that was destroyed by an interstate, but it was for the good of the people. And I've traveled that road many times through the years. But there was a time when the Department of Transportation just took the land, and that was what it was, just like the railroads did back in the early days. And I think it's a very cavalier attitude, and I think maybe it's finally coming to an end. But we've heard the sentiment of these folks here tonight. We've also heard the facts, and the facts bear out that crossover being closed at Camp J.C. Road will not make that road safer. In fact, if anything, I'm convinced it will make it less safe. And I believe that, if it's 200,000 or if it's 300,000, most of you here, if you had loved ones involved that were living on that road and one of them was killed because, or after the VDOT change was made, would it be worth 300,000 to say no? I don't think so. I think we have a moral obligation to rescind this project based on the facts that VDOT and the CTV has finally recognized the error in their ways and is finally saying we need to show more respect to the people in these communities whose roads we're going to change. And so for that, I would like to vote that we approve Resolution R 031323-09.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
We do have a motion by Mr. Davis. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Sharp. Is there any further discussion for any clarification? All right. If not, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
No.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. It's on to CTB. All right, next item on our agenda is the consideration of a resolution authorizing the advertisement of Bedford County nursing home rate changes, Resolution R 031323-10. Mr. Poff gets his long-awaited time to talk. If
Good
we could
evening.
let's just take a quick minute here. If anybody wants to leave at this time, you are free to go. If not, you are free to stay and hear the rest of this.
Well, that doesn't mean anything's going to happen.
All right, Mr. Poff, they're a quiet bunch. I believe you can go on.
Okay. Good evening. We are recommending that you approve a resolution to advertise a public hearing for a rate adjustment for our private pay residents. Typically, we increase our private pay rates annually to keep us in line with the Medicaid reimbursement rates. In 2019, we raised them $5 a day. I'm sorry. Sure. Okay. Would you like me to start?
They were quiet. They're just excited now. Oh,
He's going to shut the door.
he's shutting the door. Let's try again.
Would you like me to start over?
Just make sure you're close to the mic. It also
Okay.
helps.
So, we are asking that you approve the resolution, a resolution to advertise for a public hearing for rate adjustments for our private pay residents. Typically, we increase our rates annually to keep us in line with the Medicaid reimbursement rates. It's usually around $5 a day for the private pay residents. We did this in 2019. We did it again in 2020. But due to the pandemic and everything, we ceased to do it during 2021 and 2022. So what we're asking for now is to look at doing a $15 a day rate increase for our private pay residents, which would keep us in line with the average of $5 a day that we did not do in 21, that we did not do in 22, and this would take effect in July 1st of 2023. In addition to that, we are looking to reduce the rates of the laundry and medical supply fees that are associated with the private pay residents, as well as we would like to go from a prorated cable fee service to a standard rate for cable services. No matter whether, if a resident were to leave the facility for a week and then come back to the facility in the past, we've tried to prorate that. But the subscription fee is charged on a monthly basis anyway. And just like any of us would have to pay for our services, we're asking to just change that to a flat rate for that. So again, what I'm asking is that if you would approve a resolution to advise a public hearing for these rate adjustments I just spoke on.
Any questions for Mr. Puff?
Yeah, the laundry service fee and the medical supplies fee. What's the rationale of those going to zero?
Well, typically, a lot of our private pay residents, they'll either do their own, they typically do their own laundry. It doesn't cost us that much more to add an extra set of clothes or stuff in there. We're already doing the linen and stuff like that as well. So we don't anticipate any cost associated with that. The medical supplies, there could be some cost associated with that, but it would depend on the level of care that the resident themselves needed. So there may be very minimal, and typically we see a minimal charge, a minimal cost on that. And we believe that by increasing the rate to what we're proposing on this, that would overcome any cost or any loss that we would see on that right there. When a Medicaid resident comes in, we don't charge for medical supplies or for laundry on that as well. And this kind of keeps us in line. If we're looking to be at, a close rate to what the Medicaid reimbursement rate. And Medicaid is supposed to be your payer of last resort anyway. So by increasing these rates, we can eliminate these other costs, reducing them down.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
in order to avoid a filibuster here, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Resolution R 031323-01.
And I would second.
All right. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Bansley.
I think that was .10, not 01.
Right.
Yes. All right. Any other discussion? If not, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion passes. And now we're on to a consideration of a resolution approving hallway and room flooring replacement at the Bedford County Nursing Home, which is Resolution R 031323-11. Mr. Paul.
Thank you again. We are also recommending that the entire hallway carpeting be replaced in the nursing home, as well as the remainder rooms that have, the resident rooms that have carpet in the rooms themselves, to a LVT tile. This is the original floor that was with the building, and throughout the facility, you can see multiple areas where just wear and tear over the time has certainly shown the carpet to be in need of replacement. Typically, if you get a tear in it or something, this is a broadloom carpet, so we can't just go in and patch one little section. So what we're asking to do is for you to authorize a resolution for us to use WIT carpet to replace the entire hallway carpeting in the facility with a 2x2 tile. This way, in the areas that we identify that have the wear and tear, we will be able to periodically replace those tiles to keep our floor looking uniform and to the appearance that we desire it to be at throughout its existence. And so we're asking that we can authorize WIT carpet for the total cost of $117,362.09 for the hallway replacement. That is to tear up the existing floor or existing carpet, to haul it off, to get the floor prepped, and to put down the new carpet, as well as $79,826.68 to complete the resident room removal of carpet and putting down the LVT for them as well. This is a project that started prior to myself getting here in 2019. It was ceased during the pandemic for obvious reasons. and it's in desperate need of being repaired now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Poff on that?
Yeah, I'm sure you chose a carpet that is extremely durable.
Yes, we did, and by going with the 2x2 tile, through the normal areas that we see the excess wear and tear, we will be able to replace that and keep it looking uniform and good.
Is there warranty on that tile from the installer?
I'm sure, Doug.
Sure there is. It's a commercial carpet that carries a standard commercial warranty.
The tile.
Witt's in Salem, right?
Tile.
You
You said you're putting down tile.
The tile
is that-
for the resident
Yeah.
rooms is a glued down commercial tile as well.
Okay.
The one thing about those carpet squares like that, in theory, it sounds good, you can replace these sections, but then, 5 years down the road, they don't make that particular carpet, and then you can't match it, and then you're replacing it anyway.
We would have some carpet on the shelf for the areas that we could replace with that. So we would have some attic stock for replacement.
So you are purchasing enough extra then in this contract to be able to
Yes.
spot, treat?
Yes, sir, Mr. Sharp. Doug and I have been working with the contractor on this, and that is our anticipation, is to have enough attic stock so that when we identify the areas that need to be replaced, that we can. The difference, though, I mean, where we're at now, we have multiple areas in our existing floor that need to be replaced that's really worn, and we have nothing to put in that right there, so.
Well, I know I know a floor that can, if you've got the carpet, he can make it look perfect. Doesn't matter. But if you don't have it,
Exactly.
you can't do anything about it.
All right, any other questions?
Were there any local contractors that bid this project?
We actually use cooperative procurement with Witt Carpet through this. Doug, you want to assist me on some of this?
So this is actually under a state contract that Witt Carpet has, where the rates and the prices were negotiated with the Commonwealth of Virginia, utilized in a lot of places. Some of the benefits that state contract has for this has to be done at night because it is a fully operational facility. So this gives you flexibility of schedule to get in there and do this work during off hours. It also lets you add or deduct areas as needed instead of having a fixed bid price and having to go through the whole process of doing it that way.
Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, we talked about this on the nursing home committee too, and I thought we vetted it very well, so I'd like to make a motion to approve R031323-11.
Second.
Right. Motion by Ms. Parker, seconded by Mr. Johnson. This is a roll call. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Poff. And would you please convey to the staff our congratulations on their 5-star rating?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is a consideration of a resolution authorizing submission, acceptance, and appropriation of a school resource officer continuation grant application, Resolution R031323-07, presented by Sheriff Miller.
Yes, sir.
Colonel Miller.
Well, it's good evening now. Good evening, Board, Mr. Chair. As you can see on your agenda here, what we've done is we've asked for a continuation. When we came to you all last year, it was a 4-year grant, is what it is. So every year we have to do a continuation of this. So we are here tonight to ask you all to approve the continuation of the 4-year grant that we approved.
Any questions for Sheriff Miller?
How many SROs were we able to hire this year?
We've hired 5, but with that, 2 of our existing SROs had better jobs. One is now the director of the school safety officers, so she's in Richmond, and the other one went to ABC. So we've taken 2 of the 5 and had to replace one into a high school and one into a middle school where they were at.
We're training them too good.
What can we do to get more security at the schools? If we can't,
Mhm.
the money is here, what can we do to speed up the process of getting more
Okay.
security in the schools?
Great question. So we have 5 that has given us verbal commitments over the summer. Our problem is, and I've contacted other sheriff's offices to make sure, we have Franklin County who requested 6 and received 6. We have Amherst who requested and received 6. We have Pennsylvania County who requested an amount. So we're all competing because what the state did was they put a 2-year minimum on the certification is what they've ended up doing on it. So we're all kind of competing around this, the Central Virginia for the same people is what we're doing. Now with the 5, we have one that is, we're getting ready to hire her. She comes with a year experience out of Tennessee. So we have to give her a year experience here to meet the 2-year requirement, is what we have to do. We have 2, it's a husband and wife that are out of state, but if they come in this summer like they've told us, I've talked to them personally, is what I've ended up doing. All they have to do is their 40-hour in-service is what it is. We have one that's on the road. He's in school resource officer training today, this whole week. So he will be transferred there also. And then we have another one that's under a 3-year contract with a different department, and we're waiting on his, his will come out. He'll come out from under his contract in the summer is what he'll end up doing. So we do have verbal commitments, but that's as far as we can go without putting it in writing and then giving them a contract is what it is. So we do have officers coming on the horizon is what we have, but we are competing with other people and other departments is what we're doing.
Okay. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is this the grant where you also included fully equipped cruisers for each one of these resource officers?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So when we take the cost of a, say, a car or cruiser and add to it all the equipment, would $80,000 be enough to pay for all of that?
Well, excuse me, as I presented to the board a year ago now, or pretty close to that, we're taking used vehicles and we're trying to supplement them with that, is what we're ending up doing. So as instead of retiring them, we're working with the county garage to make sure these vehicles are in good shape and can still be used, and we're using them. So we're refurbishing, which is going to be a whole lot cheaper.
Does that increase or decrease the cycle time of a cruiser for a deputy out in the field?
No, sir.
Absolutely doesn't.
No, sir. Because these would have been recycled anyway. They would have been replaced.
Any other questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion. if
I
there-
have just one more
Yep.
point. I'm sorry, you didn't ask for discussion. I just, I made it clear in the prior presentation that I'm opposed to police cruisers being, used for this, even though they're cycling them out. I think it's a huge expense, and I'm really opposed to that side of this grant for that. I approve the grant, but I don't approve the county, which the county will be responsible to pay for these cruisers. Is that right, Mr. Hess?
Yeah, because you have to backfill the ones that are being used, the used ones that are going to the SROs will have to be backfilled with new ones for the deputies. Yeah. And you're correct. What we're finding is that the full cost to equip those are in the $75,000 range.
So 10 of those is $750,000. Is that right? Is it more than that?
No, that'd be correct. It's not all at once. It'd be staggered over time, but yes.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve Resolution R031323-07.
I would second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Johnson, seconded by Ms. Bansley. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Bansley.
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
I abstain.
We're part of the discussion. You'll have to vote.
Can't abstain at this
I have
point.
to vote?
Yep.
No.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. On to the next item is consideration of a resolution authorizing the acceptance of additional proceeds from the National Opioid Litigation Settlement, Resolution R031323-06. Mr. Skelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The county has been participating in the national opioid litigation since November 2021. As of just a few months ago, 5 additional defendants joined in that settlement process. And to facilitate receiving funds from the monies that those folks are going to pay into the fund, before you is a resolution to receive those funds when they are subject to distribution.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Skelly?
Any matching?
No, there's no county match or investment needed. The only string really attached is that the funds must be used for opioid abatement purposes, and we're still kind of working on a plan of how to appropriately spend that. So.
Seems like we've already been spending those over the years.
Right, and that's the catch, is how do we reimburse ourselves for what's been spent? So.
When I was a young fellow playing football and sports, I fell to opioids. Is there any, like, retroactive?
Any other questions for Mr. Skelly? Any discussion from the board? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve Resolution R031323-06.
Okay, Ms. Bansley has made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Mr. Davis, I believe?
Yes.
This is a roll call vote. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yeah.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
And chair votes yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That moves us to our item that was moved from the consent agenda, which is consideration of a resolution authorizing the submission, acceptance, and appropriation of a DMV Selective Enforcement Alcohol Grant for the Sheriff's Office. That's Resolution R031323-02. Looks like Sheriff Miller's going to take a stab.
Yes, sir. I think I'm the only one that jumped up. Okay, so we ask for this grant every year. This grant period that we're asking for this year goes from October the 1st, 2023 to September the 30th of 2024. We usually receive 2 grants from DMV. One is the one you're talking about tonight, which is the DUI checkpoints and patrols, and to provide extra deputy training for this is what it is. So with that said, I'll entertain any questions.
Okay, is there any questions for Sheriff Miller?
Well, Sheriff Miller, when you do these checkpoints, do you typically have patrol cars at the checkpoints?
Yes, sir.
How many patrol cars would you average?
Depending on the checkpoint. So we can do a massive checkpoint, which is usually run by the state police. So sometimes we'll shut down 460 and do a checkpoint. We've got all sorts of different departments. We have the state police, Bedford County, Campbell County, Amherst County, Lynchburg City, that participate in those type checkpoints, but they are run by the state police is what it is. But we use this grant to help our deputies off duty, to pay them to go out and with those. We can also do a smaller checkpoints to which we can approve, so the captain of the road would approve them. I think there's 27 different checkpoints throughout this county. We can use, depending on the roadway, we use as many as needs to be safe. So that can end up being anywhere from 4 to maybe 8 or 10 is what it could be. We could do that with the road shift that is working, or we could do it paying overtime is what we can end up doing. So it depends on the roadway, and it depends on how we have each one of our checkpoints designated. We have to have that approved by the state police so they can see sight vision going both directions.
I'm just, I'm very much opposed to any United States citizen being pulled over without probable cause. And my wife always gets irritated with me when we've gone through these checkpoints, but I get very upset because, again, for me to be, I'm an honest man, I've worked hard, and I've paid my taxes, and I'm a United States citizen, and sometimes I don't feel like I get treated as well as some illegal coming into this country being put up in a hotel. And I realize, Sheriff, you have nothing to do with that.
Correct.
But my point is without probable cause, you have no right to pull me over. And I believe that firmly. And in fact, one night, we were pulled over on a railroad track on Reed Mountain Road in Hollins. And when I started telling the sheriff, I said, you realize that the police officer, that there are people sitting on these railroad tracks behind us and we're holding them up? He said, sir, if you don't shut up, you're going to jail. And I'll tell you what, I don't pay, I have a tremendous, I grew up with a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement. But I have no respect for that man. And I called the folks over there in Botetourt and I let them have it. Because people could have gotten killed there that night. That was a poor lack of judgment. But beside, that's not talking about you. Now, there's also been plenty of cases where there have been accidents where people have been seriously injured and killed at these checkpoints because people come up behind them. For instance, I think about 460 people traveling at a high rate of speed, and someone may well be intoxicated and fly up and hit somebody, and that accident probably wouldn't have happened had folks not been stopped on the highway. And I could go on and on and on and filibuster this all night long, Mr. Johnson, but I think my point is made. And I'm just not in, I love to support you, Sheriff.
Yes,
but
sir.
this is one thing I cannot support, pulling people over with no probable cause. And furthermore, if you put those 4 to 7 cars out patrolling, I believe you'd stand a much higher chance of traveling the right areas of pulling over someone who is driving impaired.
Thank you, sir. We also work with DMV just to make sure everybody knows this. We look at where the fatalities are in our counties, and that's one of the tools in our tool belt to be able to go out and be able to tackle this problem with drunk driving and everything else that comes through there, through our checkpoints is what we do. It is based to the Constitution, and it is still constitutionally correct for us to be able to do this.
Any other questions for the sheriff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate everything our sheriff's department does for us. They're doing what they're paid to do and what they're told to do, and out there risking their lives every day, leaving home, loved ones not knowing whether they're going to show back up. So I appreciate everything that y'all doing. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution R031323-02. No.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Bansley. I believe we can do this one with just a voice vote. Roll call on this one. Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
No.
Mr. Davis?
No.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, as long as they don't serve donuts while they're doing it.
Ms. Barker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes.
That if they're Butterfinger flavored.
Butterfingers are fine.
All right. Let me get back. Let's see. We have no board committee reports, I don't believe.
Mr.
kickoff
Chair,
in
unless
3
you want
minutes.
to, you want me to briefly talk about the meeting with the mayor, vice mayor, and chair?
Sure, yes.
So last week, the chair and vice chair had a meeting with the mayor and vice mayor and town manager of Bedford. We talked. The main topic of discussion was, of course, a boundary adjustment through the reversion agreement. I guess I thought it was a good opportunity to hear for the county to provide our feedback to the town leaders about what we're hearing from the county citizens about this boundary adjustment. It was also good for us to hear some of the thoughts and wishes and desires of the town leaders as well regarding this. Items I know that we touched on in particular were, of course, taxes. You know, the taxes are going to go up 60% for those who are living, who are going to be affected by this boundary adjustment, and how that is a considerable increase, and that urge the town to reconsider their tax rate regarding that. We talked about earlier this evening the waste disposal and curbside pickup, and about some concerns about one of the existing companies, Sharp Brothers, who services some of these neighborhoods, about their viability financially in terms of continuing doing their business with picking up trash, and they've been doing I learned that for a long, long time. with the town now doing curbside pickup from the town perspective, that concern was shared. The code enforcement, just in general, how there's a lot, how is that going to be communicated, how that's going to be enforced. I mean, the town has a code of ordinances that the county citizens may or may not be used to having to abide with. So, and that covers a wide gamut of activities. Two other things, just capital projects. The reversion agreement talks about how the town needs to have a plan in terms of providing, infrastructure to the previously unincorporated areas that the other town residents enjoy. So we talked a good bit about that, about what their plans are in terms of extending, sidewalks, streetlights, working with BRWA in terms of water, fire hydrants, things like that. Probably the final thing, and maybe one of the more, certainly not the least important, maybe one of the more important ones, is about the rural parcels. So really, the reversion agreement concentrates mostly on town and country in the North Hills area, but the reversion agreement also, well, the maps of the reversion agreement also had some rural parcels included, but those are certainly optional. In terms of if the town wanted to proceed with taking in those more rural, less developed parcels. So we had a good discussion about that. Whether or not that changes or not remains to be seen. But those were the main topics I remember, unless the chair and vice chair had anything else. But,
I think that was pretty accurate.
okay. And then yes, so that was the main topic. That's mostly what we talked about. So.
Board comments. Any board members have anything they need to share? Well, good. We have no appointments. Mr. Hiss, anything for the county administrator?
No, I had no other report other than just the closed session that we needed for this economic development project.
All right, Mr. Skelly?
I would call for a motion pursuant to section 2.2-3711A5, discussion regarding a prospective business or industry, and specifically an economic development project.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Scott? And second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? We are in closed session.
check with Peter.
All right, looking for a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
Let's see, that was Mr. Johnson and Ms. Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are back in open session. Mr. Skelly.
And whereas the Bedford County Board of Supervisors convene a closed meeting pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Bedford County Board of Supervisors that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore it be resolved that the Bedford County Board of Supervisors does hereby certify that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters that were identified in the the motion convening the closed meeting was heard, discussed, or considered by the Bedford County Board of Supervisors. Mr. Johnson?
Easy for you to say. Aye.
Ms. Bansley?
Aye.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And Mr. Tuck?
Yes.
So certified.
Do you have anything else to report?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hiss, if you'd like to do board calendar.
Really just update for March 20th. We'll be meeting downstairs in the downstairs conference room. The first part of the meeting will be hearing from the school superintendent and their finance director about the school budget and their CIP work that they've done. And then after that discussion's over, we'll transition into a budget work session for the county's general fund and other budget items we may want to discuss. So that's it.
All right. Mr. Scott, is anything you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned.
We didn't,